And we have breaking news tonight involving this neighborhood nightmare playing out in Van Nuys. New video tonight showing the man responsible for blaring horns and sirens being taken into custody. It's a saga we've been following for 2 days, and tonight the LAPD is taking action.
Oftentimes on this channel, we discuss bad policies and the implications or consequences of said policies. But typically, when we cover a bad policy and its negative consequence, usually there is a logical linear progression to how things got so bad. Perfect example of this is that a lot of different municipalities ended up downgrading crimes that you could charge people who are under the age of 18 with, and as a result of that, you have a bunch of different youths across this country stealing cars at an extraordinarily high rate, and because they can never be prosecuted for this just keeps going. This is how you get phenomena like the Kia boys, but again, this is something that's linear. It makes sense. Step one was you said you were not going to hold anybody under the age of 18 responsible for car theft. Therefore, you see an explosion in car thefts by perpetrators that are under the age of 18. And again, we constantly and consistently see these results bear out via these bad policies. But what we're going to talk about today is way more interesting. What we're going to talk about today is something that you would never think of, that you would never imagine, but is a perfect distillation of the consequences, unintended and unforeseen, when you stop enforcing laws of public order. And in the city of Los Angeles, they're absolutely no stranger to this. The homeless are granted God-tier rights to camp wherever they want. They end up tapping power lines, tapping water lines, creating fire hazards, and all sorts of other problems with their presence that is enabled by the city of Los Angeles. And this is something that we typically see. However, in this particular case, we have a homeowner who obviously has some significant mental issues, and he decided that it was appropriate to hook up extraordinarily loud train horns to his property and fire them off on all hours of the night and all hours of the day. He also installed an extraordinarily loud home alarm that he also sets off 24/7 in this particular neighborhood. And guess what? The residents of this neighborhood in the city of Los Angeles have just had to deal with it for months because those public order crimes never get enforced. This is the consequence of absolutely idiotic policy, and of course, it negatively impacts the peace of mind of all of these different neighbors, and they were, until very recently, powerless to engage with this criminal. And this is what we're going to talk about today. But before we do, I want to thank everybody who supports this channel via actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money, okay?
And Mark, I'll pause for a second because you could literally hear crickets out here tonight. Residents in this neighborhood will sleep easy this evening, both literally and figuratively, as the man who lives in this house here behind me that has been blasting loud noises through the streets is in jail tonight.
So the local news reporter makes a remark about how amazing it is that you can quite literally hear crickets in this Los Angeles neighborhood, and then he goes on to say that the neighbors in this area will sleep easy, literally and figuratively. I don't know how they're metaphorically sleeping easy. I don't know what you're trying to say, due to the fact that this man was arrested because he was consistently blasting an extraordinarily loud train horn in this neighborhood all hours of the day and all hours of the night 4 months, and finally, the law decided to step in. Finally, after the neighbors were so outraged by this that they ended up pushing for some kind of media attention, the LAPD was like, okay, I guess we'll enforce the law in this particular case, but normally we don't want to because we have all these woke reforms from the city council that prevent us from doing so. But again, just imagine paying the prices that it takes to live in a Los Angeles suburb only to have somebody blasting a train horn all hours of the night in your area consistently 4 months, and the police being completely powerless to stop it.
Are we going through the same thing again? Tell me! Tell me!
His arrest nearly as loud as the blaring horns that brought LAPD here in the first place.
Answer my question! Answer my question!
He was just yelling right away. So we're like, oh, there's no missing that when he's yelling and screaming. hear that from a mile away.
Gary Boyanzi.
So in the least ironic thing in the history of anti-irony, this guy is screaming and yelling at the top of his lungs as the police show up to finally arrest him for blasting these horns. And the neighbors are obviously overjoyed that this man is being arrested, that he has been sent to jail, due to the fact that they've been trying to get this to happen for months in this area, but the police have not really been doing anything because, again, they have been disabled by the Los Angeles City Council because, you know, these quality of life crimes, they are honestly just a mechanism of evil white racism, so we have to remove them so that way we could stop the police from being evil white racists. Now, I will also point out that everybody in this particular story happens to be white. The guy who's behind this, white. The people in the neighborhood, white. But the thing is, if you pass laws to basically disable the police's ability to enforce these public order crimes, whether they be for racial justice or so-called justice for the homeless, in reality, you are going to get ridiculous results like this, and a perfect distillation of it, and a ridiculous over-the-top distillation of it, is this man blasting train horns in this area.
Gary Boyanzian taken into custody Wednesday night after months of countless complaints from his neighbors for this. Deafening train horns that were placed high on a tree in his backyard, and if it wasn't the horn, it was his house alarm, also intentionally set off.
So how bad does this have to get that when you look around the neighborhood, there are flyers instructing people in said neighborhood to call their complaints in to a specific officer at the local precinct because this has been going on very often. Again, look at it for yourself. I'll read it to you guys out there in the audience for my podcast listeners. It says, sick of the loud horn blast, and then it gives the address where it's coming from, and then it says contact Officer Gutierrez at this phone number in order to register your complaint. And again, people had been doing this 4 months. 4 months this was going on, but it turns out the person that happens to be behind this is likely suffering from some kind of mental illness, and we all know in the state of California, you can never remove a mentally ill person from the streets. In fact, you have to wait for a mentally ill person to actually go off and kill somebody or try to kill somebody before the law will intervene, because mentally ill people, I don't know if you guys know this, I don't know if you guys are aware of this, are innocent Beba Angel Aladdins who are just trying to feed their starving family, and you wouldn't want to criminalize poverty. I mean, sure, this guy is a homeowner. Sure, this guy can afford the loud train horns and an alarm system in this area, and he's just blasting it constantly, but in some way, shape, or form, the real origin behind this public disorder crime right here is actually poverty. And if anybody knows what poverty was wearing, if anybody has any video of poverty installing those train horns, then please contact Officer Gutierrez over at the police department at the number provided on this flyer in the local news segment, so that way we can get a resolution. That way poverty can finally be held accountable for all the crimes that it's been committing for decades in this country. Again, absurd, but this is what people actually believe. This is what people actually think would be the consequences of you going after these public disorder crimes. They think you would be targeting poverty, and little do they know, you get crazy results when you start letting people do all kinds of crazy things and let them escalate like this.
LAPD says they responded to his home on Peach Avenue in Van Nuys more than 5 times, and this morning gave him an administrative citation. But it clearly turned criminal. Boyadzian left for several hours, and when he returned, police were nearby.
So right there, you hear the loudness of the train horns, you hear the loudness of the alarm system, and I just want everybody to understand that if a local resident were to get angry, were to go into this person's backyard, not to steal anything, but to remove said train horns, because again, they've been blowing for 5 months in this area without the LAPD doing absolutely anything about it, the LAPD would have turned around and charged these people in the neighborhood for their crimes. If somebody was so pissed off because they can't get any sleep, they're having trouble at work as a consequence of not being able to get any sleep, that they would have confronted this individual, the police would have arrested them. Again, this is the consequence. This is what you're setting yourself up for when you don't enforce crimes of disorder. And this guy was clearly and obviously over the top. His justification is absolute madness. But again, the real madness are the policies that enable this kind of behavior.
Watching and listening.
He came out and thought everything was over, so he went out and watered his lawn, and a couple of the
plainclothes vehicles just pulled up real quick and snatched him on the lawn. And he was yelling and screaming and resisting arrest. And he was screaming in the car. You could hear the car as it went down the street, could hear him screaming.
So the police showed up to this location 5 times. 5 different times they showed up, and the best they could do on the 5th time was give an administrative citation. And this is the point in time that I want to remind you guys that we're talking about the city of Los Angeles. We're talking about a city where if a car barrels into your business because a mob of looters want to tear the place up, the LAPD will start fining you the very next day for the disarray of the front of your building. We're talking about a city, and we've covered stories about this in the past, where you have all these bureaucrats showing up to businesses with a tape measure, measuring the distance that those little pop-up signs are in front of a particular store. And if they're even half an inch over, they write them tickets in, again, the same exact street corners where there's a homeless encampment down on the street. And the justification that they gave in those particular instances is that a person with a wheelchair might not be able to get around if this is more than a quarter of an inch over where it's supposed to be. However, the homeless encampment's blocking the whole sidewalk, no problem. If this guy would have tried to, redo the pavement in his driveway, the police would have been on him. He would have been cited immediately to the tune of tens of thousands of dollars. But apparently, train horns for 5 months gets you 5 visits, absolutely nothing, but then eventually a ticket. And then when the media shows up, that's when you start getting the tickets. When the media gets wind of it, that's when an arrest comes. If nobody went to the local news, this would not have happened. The train horns would still be blowing. The people in the neighborhood would still be calling the police, filing their complaints, and they would still be doing nothing. This is the madness of Los Angeles. This is the madness of criminal justice reform. And yeah, if you hear a train horn for 5 months straight in your local suburban neighborhood, you might be driven mad yourself, in which case you will unlock the God tier rights in the city of Los Angeles to do whatever the hell you want.
Boyanzian was taken away, but the horns haven't been taken down yet. But with no one home to set them off, at least it'll be quiet tonight.
The neighborhood's a huge relief. We know we're not going to hear that horn, and it's disrupting no matter what you're doing.
So I think this is a very good lesson in the idea that people don't know what they're missing until it's actually removed. They don't understand the value of something until it's taken away. And a perfect example of this is the LAPD cracking down on crimes of disorder. Again, this neighborhood could very easily, and I'm not saying this is 100% true, be Democratic voters. They could very easily be Karen Bass supporters. They could have been fine with all this talk of criminal justice reform, but as soon as they got a taste of it, as soon as they started to hear it for themselves, that's when they decided absolutely not. And you can see all these people laughing at the fact that this guy got arrested, and it's not a laugh at this person's pain, it's a laugh of relief because they didn't realize how out of control things had actually gotten. Now, these people need to take that with them into the voting booth, never vote for a candidate like Karen Bass or Gavin Newsom ever again, and maybe we'll see something better for the state of California, but as of right now, this is just standard operating procedure.
Earlier today, when we asked him why he sounds off the alarms, he unleashed an unsubstantiated story about the mafia trying to kill him and LAPD assisting in the plot.
Some of the neighbors we spoke to say you have mental health problems.
They have mental health problems. My problem, he wants to kill me. My life is in danger. If they don't want to seem to understand it, that's no problem.
LAPD hasn't said what they've charged him with just yet, but for neighbors it's moot. Because for the moment, silence never sounded so good.
Finally.
Yeah, this guy's not exactly beating the allegations that he has mental health problems. First thing he does is accuse everybody else of having mental health problems, and then he says some mobster is trying to kill him, and if these people don't like the horns, which are in response to somebody trying to kill him, that's their problem. And again, logically, this doesn't connect. Logically, it doesn't make any sense at all whatsoever that this guy is blasting off train horns, which, by the way, if you're known to be the guy shooting off train horns, all you're doing is telling absolutely everyone where you live in order to fight off mafia assassins that are coordinating with the LAPD. Again, doesn't make any sense, has no logical consistency to this, and normally in a sane, sober-minded society, what we would do is force this guy into some kind of treatment because he's becoming a disturbance, he's obviously unhinged, but guess what? It's Los Angeles, baby. He's allowed to do that for 5 months. What happens if he thought that that one of his neighbors was in on this plot to assassinate him? What happens if he, instead of blaring the horns, he eventually snaps, grabs a firearm, and takes said neighbor out? If that were to happen after months and months and months of the police doing nothing about the horns, you would then have Democratic politicians go around and talk about mental health issues and how we have to address mental health very seriously and how a mentally ill person shouldn't have a firearm, all while their policies prevented an arrest of this mentally ill person that maybe could have stripped his rights to have a firearm.
Yeah, so now we can relax and just live our lives the best way we can.
So don't get me wrong, I'm happy for the people in this neighborhood that they finally have some peace and quiet, but this needs to be taught as a lesson to all these different various progressives that think it's a good idea to remove public order enforcement. Sure, this is an extreme example, but the fact is, you sometimes need an example like this of something blaring in your ears for you to not ignore it, because the people of Los Angeles for years have been ignoring all the other examples, the rise in homelessness, the rise in urban decay in their major cities, and again, they have not done anything about it. And I only could dream that this person was setting off his train horns near where Mayor Karen Bass lives or where Gavin Newsom lives, so that way they could understand the consequences of their own policies, or maybe near the state legislatures, because in reality, this only got attention because the media gave it attention, and but for the media actually intervening on behalf of this neighborhood, there would be no consequences. This guy would still be doing it, and that's absolutely ridiculous. But you know what? Those are just my thoughts. I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. As per usual, if you like this video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on my social medias, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about a madman blowing a train horn 24/7. Till next time.